Hello everybody, update 1.5 for No Man's Sky is out, titled No Man's Sky Next, and that is extremely fitting because this is basically a whole new game. I have been evangelizing No Man's Sky since the previous update, which was Atlas Rises. It was in that update that I came to the conclusion that, okay, this is now the game that they promised us. This is the game that they've advertised and shown in all of those like E3 trailers for so many years. With Atlas Rises, I was like, yes, this is that game now. They had added so much, like new base building mechanics, which there weren't any at launch. So they added base building mechanics, improved upon those in Atlas Rises, added a ton of new vehicles to be able to go strolling around planets on, and just generally updated how the galaxy generated planets, which meant that you were going on to planets that looked way better than they did at launch, and there was way cool things to find on those planets. So the last patch was like, this is that game that they promised us, and you could tell that they were really happy with it. I was really happy with it, which is why I evangelized it. And I keep telling people to pick up this game now because it's totally worth it, but with this newest update, I feel like they have finally seen that they were, at the point that they wanted it to be, the point that they had promised everybody, and they just took it to a whole new level. This game is exceptionally good now compared to the previous patches, and that's saying a lot because, again, the last patch was very, very good. Honestly, this game is going to go down as one of the greatest turnarounds in gaming history because of this. So you look at things like Final Fantasy XIV, which launched in a terrible state, and then they relaunched the game, and now it's great. You even look at things like Diablo 3, and then going to Reaper of Souls, that was a massive turnaround in that game's lifespan. This is the same thing, if not much greater than those games. When this game launched, it had the worst press ever. People hated this game when it launched because there was so much hype behind it, and it definitely did not live up behind any of that. Now, you looked at Steam over the last update, and the overall reviews had gone from mostly negative to negative, and all of the recent reviews were all very positive. So, the last update made a pretty big change in the fact that even on Steam, you could see a difference in the amount of reviews coming in for this game. The interesting thing is that with this patch has now gone from negative to mixed. So it's going up quite a bit, and that says a lot because there were a lot of negative reviews. And that's because you have people who are coming fresh into the game who are putting in a review, and it's a very positive review, and they're like, I don't know what all these other people are talking about, this game is great. And then you have even the people who are coming back to the game, updating their negative reviews, making them positive, and that's having a massive outcome on what the Steam store page for this game is actually showing as far as reviews are concerned. Like I said, this is going to be going down as one of the biggest comebacks in gaming history because if this game launched this year in this state like this without any having to patch and all the bad press at launch and everything, this would be on my list of potential game of the years for this year because it is actually just that good. It is really, really freaking good. So what is good about it? Let's go over the patch notes and kind of figure out what they've changed and compare that a little bit with Atlas Rises, which they've added, plenty of stuff in the past. So like, how does that change the game to what it is now? Well, first things first, we got to remember that in Atlas Rises, they technically did add multiplayer to the game. There wasn't actually multiplayer in the game before. You could go to the exact same spot in the universe, which was hard to do as another player, and you wouldn't see them. You weren't online with the game. It was connected to an online server, but you were never actually online in the fact that you could see other players. In the previous update, they kind of added multiplayer in the way that if you went to the same area as another player, you would appear as like this glowing ball moving around, and they could see you and kind of interact with you in weird ways, but it was a fake multiplayer version. You could see other players and what they were building and their bases they were building, but you couldn't actually really see the other players. All of this is obviously down to the fact they didn't have player models for characters, and they didn't have animations for those, so you were just this little floaty ball. It's pretty clever way of being able to add a player into a world without necessarily having to go through the process of adding in animations and, you know, all of that kind of stuff, and proper netcode to be able to handle all of this. With this update, that's completely different. Multiplayer is completely in the game. So I'm just going to go from like top to bottom on all these changes. And with that knowledge that, you know, multiplayer is in, vehicles are totally in and updated, and they've redone a lot of the generation of how the worlds work, that should give you a pretty good, I guess, idea of how the game has changed between the last patch and this new one. So you have full-on multiplayer. You can group up with other players. You can see their ships. You can see the player. You can see their bases. You can build bases next to each other, because you can build bases anywhere on any world that you want to. You just put down a little base thing, and it essentially claims that area, and you can start building, which is great. From the start of the game, you launch it, and it says, hey, I want to just go jump in and start playing. Or, hey, I want to group up with another player. But both of those make it very clear that you could group up at any time. It's just if you want to group up from the beginning, the start of a new like playthrough, then you can do it right from the menu. You could just, you know, invite another player and then start with them, which is a really cool experience. On top of that, there's other players in the universe. This is now a multiplayer experience in weird ways where you can go find other players and you can help them and you can communicate with them, because there is new voice chat in the game. So it's proximity voice chat, kind of like a lot of those survival games that people play, like Conan Exiles or Ark or stuff like that. So you have proximity voice chat, but on PC you also have text chat that you can talk to other players with, and you could just go find other players, group up with them and have fun. Or you can attack them and kill them and take their stuff. Or you can, and not like you're going to blow up their buildings and stuff, but you can go and, you know, essentially be a pirate on those people. You can fly around and attack other players if you wanted to, or you could team up with them and go and take down like massive freighters and stuff with other players, which is freaking awesome. The fact that you can sit there and build with each other, you can build farms, you can build bases. They give the example of like you can build racetracks for your vehicles. I think that's really cool, and you could share those with other people who are playing. That is like the best part of this game. That is mind-boggling that they missed that at launch. It was supposed to be there, but they missed it, and that is one of the reasons why people were so hard on this game when it did launch. On top of all of that, you can progress with other players through the story, and you could do that from the very start of the game. The whole idea of being able to progress through the story with another player means that you're going to feel a lot less alone in the galaxy. It's kind of, or the universe, because that's kind of what it felt like before. Is you were going through the story, but it felt very alone, and it had like an eerie feeling to that. So to be able to do that with another player, I'm really excited for that prospect. I know that I have plenty of friends that I can get into the game, friends that have the game as well, and I can be able to play that with them. I'm really looking forward to that. They also have like multiplayer missions at the, I think they call it a galactic commission station on the bridge of your ship, or you could like go and do that kind of stuff with them, and you can essentially go find other players if you wanted to, if that was your thing. Most of that involves other chance encounters with players being their orbs, like they were in the past patch, rather, which is okay. But for the most part, you'll be able to go out and find other players and team up with them and just, you know, have a really cool multiplayer experience. And then you have new weekly events coming soon, and those will reward you with new customizations and, you know, stuff like that for your ships or for your characters, because character customization is completely in. I'll talk about that in a moment, but these weekly events will be able to kind of inspire your friends to come back on a, you know, weekly basis. You can get together and you can go do these events, which is fan-freaking-tastic. That also ties in with the new website they have, which is the Galactic Atlas, which is basically the galaxy as you see it in the game. It is now on a website. You can go and explore it. That's where you'll see all the weekly events, and you can go and, you know, group up with people and then, you know, go do those things, which is really cool that they have a website tie-in to begin with. There's also going to be like points of interest on those maps, or all like the statistics of what people have discovered and everything, which obviously is freaking cool. When it comes down to base building, they have, again, made it so you can build anywhere on any planet. You know, you could do it underwater, which is something that I've tried doing on one of my playthroughs that I've recently started, and it's not easy, but it is really freaking cool that you can even do that. They've added hundreds of new parts to the game to be able to base build with, and they've updated how teleporters work because of that. So you could just put a teleporter anywhere on any planet surface, and then when you go to your teleporters, like if you're going to teleport from a space station down to your base, it's listed in a much more obvious fashion with which options are the ones that you're able to go to. And I'm pretty sure it always shows your base, so you can pretty much go anywhere in the universe and then teleport back to your base as you want. On top of that, you can have as many bases as you want. You can go to different planets and just plop down a ton of bases. You can have a base on each planet in your system if that's something that you wanted to do, and be able to have basically an area where you can store a ton of resources without having to go all the way back to your home planet, if that is another thing. You can have teleporters between all of your planets as well, so it's kind of an interesting way to do it, but at the same time, it's the most freeing way to do it, where you can build anywhere, you can build anything, you can build any way that you want to. Previously in the game, with the Atlas Rises update, you can only build in specific hubs on specific planets. That is no longer the case. You're free to do whatever the heck you want, which is awesome. You can even use the terrain manipulator to manipulate the ground around your base to be the way that you want. So if you're into games like Minecraft and stuff like that, this is a good version of how those kind of creative systems work. You've probably noticed in the background on the footage that I have third person enabled. That is a new thing. So third person is enabled for both ground and in-flight stuff. So you could be in your ship and you could be in third person if you want, or you could be on the ground, you could be in third person. I actually prefer the third person on the ground stuff because for whatever reason, their FOV has always seemed really low in first person, even though it goes all the way up to 100. But that's like, how are they calculating what 100 is on your FOV? I don't know. It's kind of made me motion sick in the past while playing the game. So playing in third person has made that experience way smoother for me. I feel like playing third person in the ship, while it's really cool, you're missing out on a lot of the detail of the stuff that's in your cockpit and all the information that's there, which is basically your HUD, showing you how much fuel you have left, what weapons you're on, and all that. So I prefer to use first person on the ships and third person on the ground, but you can switch between the two freely and it will remember one for each. They also improved the ship controls. Like in the previous patch, you had the low flight mode, which meant you can actually kind of be close to the surface when you're flying. When the game first launched, it wouldn't let you fly anywhere near the surface of the planet. It kind of like autopiloted over it all. Now you can even like fly through caves if you wanted to, or like archways. That's totally an option. You can pretty much fly anywhere you want on the planet's surface, but you got to be careful because it's pretty easy to crash into stuff like trees and whatnot, which actually does do damage to your ship, and that's not a good thing. But just be careful when flying around. They've completely changed how it behaves and how it feels when flying on the surface. Like I said, it is very easy to crash, so just kind of be careful with that. On top of the multiplayer stuff, they've redone, or rather, they've just added animations and models for all the players, and whatever player model that you decide to do. So they have new, like, expressive gestures, is what they call them, in a little quick menu that you can pop up. You can basically emote to other players if that's what you wanted to do, which is awesome considering the fact that and this is what I said earlier, you can completely customize your character, and in third person, now you can see your character, which is awesome. But when you customize it, you can choose to not necessarily play as the Traveler, which is what you start with typically in the game, which is basically like some weird humanoid thing. You don't really know because it's got a helmet on. You could also play as all of the other races, like the Gek, the Viking, the Korvax, and the I think it was the Traveler, because you play as the Anomaly, but I think you can also play as Traveler. I don't remember how it ends up working, but there's all these like aliens you can choose from, and you can customize each piece, like your helmet. your torso, the armor over your torso, your gloves, your legs, the boots, the backpack you got. You could change the color, like 3 different color sets on each of those, or what markings they have, and change the color of those markings. It's freaking awesome. And there's so many customization options available to you once you get there. These customization stations are on the space stations. You just walk up to it and you start using it. It's free to use. You're not using any of like your units when you're doing this, so you can go and customize yourself and then save presets for yourself too. It's awesome. I really like that you could customize your character, especially as an RPG player. They've almost overhauled how freighters work. So freighters being like the big ships that you could buy, they are now updated in the way that you can have fleets. So essentially, if you have like this freighter, you can have like frigates and stuff around you. You can have all of these ships in a fleet of yours, or you and your friends, which is cool. And each of these are kind of specialized to have different effects. You know, some are more for combat, some are more for like trade. It's like they have like a huge inventory, so you can like trade between systems, like you could in the past update, but now it's, you know, more prevalent in this one. There are real-time fleet missions that you could carry out, which is freaking awesome. So if you have a fleet of ships, you can actually carry out missions with those, and that could be done with you and your friends, which of course is awesome. Imagine having like several fleets of ships just kind of like hovering around. You can summon your ship at any time, or any of your ships at any time now. So that way, if you're, you know, in space and you're like, damn it, where's my frigate? I'm like in my fighter, you can summon that to your position now, which is awesome. They completely redid all of the resources. Things like carbon still remain the same. You still get those from like plants and certain kind of rocks and stuff. But they've added like titanium and ferrite, which are new stuff. They've added oxygen and deuterium. I think there's a couple other new ones that I don't quite remember. But the reason they've done this is just to rebalance how the stuff works. You know, you get a lot more resources now, and it's a lot more realistic than it was before. On top of that, there's new deployable tech that you can like pick up immediately after going and, you know, putting it down. So there's like a refinery where you can refine your resources, like copper, for example, into, you know, a different kind of metal, and that is used for, you know, different crafting and whatnot. So you have like a refinery, you have the like beacons and stuff before that you had, but all of that can now be picked up and just put in your inventory, which is freaking fantastic, because you couldn't really pick it up and have it as like an item to move around. You could pick it up and move it, but you couldn't really have it as a thing that you could just like store. And I like that that is an option now. On top of just all of the changes to resources and them being a lot more plentiful when you mine them, it feels like the game is a little less grindy than it was before. And if you like games like Diablo, you know, me being a huge example of that, they have new procedurally done modifications for weapons. So, for example, you could find ones that have like extra damage or extra accuracy, or maybe make you mine faster and whatnot. And each of those stats are randomly generated. So when you find these modifications, which you can buy on like space stations and whatnot, you could put them onto your weapons or your ship or your suit and have the effect of like playing a Diablo-like game where you're finding these loot things and putting them on your stuff and like upgrading as you go, which is always kind of fun and exciting to find a new piece of gear. And the fact that they've added that into the game in a much better way than they had before, it feels a lot more exciting. On top of that, you know, mining tools and whatnot that you would find before, like your multi-tool, you could go into like random buildings and find ones that would be much better than what you had to start with, and you would find those and, you know, get them, and maybe you would upgrade them. Well, now those things aren't just having their inventory slots locked out and you kind of like use credits to purchase those slots so you can add more stuff to it. It's now they have like wiring missing or stuff like that, and you have to actually repair specific things. So it's not just putting a ton of units into a new tool, it's how much resources you have in order to repair certain aspects of this tool. So there's a lot more decision making going on when you find a new multi-tool or a new ship, of like, how much is this actually going to cost to repair? Because I'm not just putting my money into it, I'm putting my my resources into it. So like, if you're in a system that has an excess of a certain resource and you find a ship that has things that need repaired on it that use that resource, you're like, perfect, let's use this ship instead of the one I got, and just, you know, put some resources into it, and then I got a better ship, which is awesome. I feel like anytime I get to a new change, I'm sitting over here being like, but wait, there's more, because that's what it's like. There's so many different and new things in this update that completely changes the way that the game behaves, like the new visor. So when you would do your scanning before, it wasn't nearly as cool as this, where basically you have this visor, it's like binoculars, you can look around and you can scan things, right? This is how you get your discoveries. This is how you scan animals or plants or rocks and get credits from, you know, discovering those things. And then you could take those things that you're discovering and upload them and rename them. So when another player visits this planet, suddenly, you know, everything is named the Zenkiki animal of whatever, or the Zenkiki plant. And you're like, oh gosh, this guy is really full of himself, isn't he? But, you know, you come across some planets like that in the game where people have named stuff. Well, now you could still do that stuff, but with the new visor, it makes it a lot easier to do so. And on top of that, they have new markers all over the world. So you could see like, oh, there is a copper deposit over there, or there is an underground thing over there that I need to go excavate, or there is a crashed ship over there I can go get, or there's a ruins, or, you know, there's all of this stuff that you can now see on your visor. On top of that, you can also see like what available resources are on this planet, or what your objective is for your, you know, whatever you need to do for your mission. Or you can even see your exact location because they have new like coordinates. So if you're trying to like relate to one of your friends where you're at because they can't find you, you could just give them the coordinates, and that's a pretty good way of doing that. So the whole new scanning thing works way better than it did before, and I feel like anytime I go to scan things, I'm not feeling like I'm like taking a sigh like I used to before, because before it seemed a little sluggish. This one is a lot quicker to go into, and being able to see like essentially objectives out in the distance that you could just go and explore makes the game feel a lot bigger in an interesting way. They redid the opening of the game, so like the tutorial is a lot different, and I feel like it does a lot better of a job kind of easing you into, you know, hey, this is how you collect resources. You put your resources into your ship to repair your ship. And okay, now you can get some fuel into your ship, and now you've taken off, and now you can kind of explore the planet you're on. And then it's like, or you could go just straight up and start exploring the other planets in your system, but you can't hyper jump yet, not because you don't have the fuel, but because you don't have like a hyperdrive, and you got to go and make one of those. And the missions do a very good job of teaching you how to do that, and I totally appreciate that. They've also just added a ton of new missions on like the space stations, like photography missions are a new one, which I think is interesting, or feeding missions where you go feed some of the fauna on a planet. There's archaeological missions, you go and, you know, dig up ruins and stuff, which is cool. There's hunting missions like there were before. It's kind of cool how they've done the mission system now, because it feels a lot better than the one that they had previous, and the one they had previous was pretty good to begin with. Outside of the third-person camera, if you've noticed that the game looks a lot prettier than it did when the game launched, that's because they've made a huge amount of updates to the engine and how things are generated. And this patch is no different. There's a lot of updates here. So they improved the draw distance, which means you can see things from further away. This doesn't have an effect on performance because of some of the other gains they've made, so it's kind of like a net zero, like you haven't gained or lost any FPS because of this change. But if you are experiencing FPS loss on PC, the trick is to turn off your VSync in the game. For whatever reason, that's just tanking performance. So if you turn that off, you'll notice a increase in performance. If you still have screen tearing and it's really bad, you can go into your NVIDIA control panel or your AMD stuff and be able to turn on VSync there and force enable triple buffering, and that will have the effect of having VSync on in the game with increased performance and no screen tearing. So that's just a little pro tip. You can find that kind of information all over the internet right now, but for the most part, if you're having performance issues, just turn off VSync in the game, and you should notice a huge increase. So with that, you have way better terrain generation on planets. They made things feel a lot more natural, you know, like caves actually work well and caves look good compared to before. With the improved draw distance, all of this just looks a lot better. When you're in orbit, a planet is more representative of what it looks like in orbit than it does before. You know, you would, like in the last patch, you would be in orbit, you would see a landmass, you'd be like, I want to go to that landmass. You'd start flying down to the planet, and once you got like halfway there, things would change dramatically, and you're like, whoa, 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 that's not where I wanted to go. Now, that's not necessarily the case as much as it was before. It's more representative. It's not perfect, but it is better than it was. Color palettes have been greatly diversified as far as like different planets are concerned. Some planets you'll go on, you'll notice like everything changes color, even the lights on your ship and stuff. And it's really kind of a cool effect because you'll find some very unique planets out there that some look like hellscapes, some look like paradises, but because of the color palette variety, you'll see much different looking planets across the board. Then you have things like denser forests, way bigger trees, abandoned and empty systems, and even completely abandoned space stations, which are really cool to go explore. There's just a lot of stuff there. But if you're looking forward to things that are coming soon that aren't quite in yet, they are going to be adding tessellation here soon, which basically means there's going to be bump maps on the planet. So right now, the planet surface is just a flat surface and just doodads and objects thrown on top of it to make it look bumpy, you know, like rocks and whatnot. Well, with tessellation, you'll notice that the surface is actually not completely flat. It is actually bumpy, and you can see like a lot of texture in it. It's really subtle, but it makes the game look a lot more natural. They made storms look a lot cooler and a lot more dangerous, to be honest. I started on a planet with like a rainstorm that was acid, and it was actually kind of scary. It was I didn't want to be on that planet, so I restarted my game because that storm was a little crazy compared to some of the other like nice little snowy planets that I've been on. They've added a lot more textures to spaceships. You'll notice, like, if you look at your old spaceships compared to your new ones, there's like 50 or 60 new decals on your ship, so it just makes it look way more detailed and a lot better. It just overall, I think the ships look better just because of the increase in decals, but the textures are also higher resolution now, which is great. Some planets have rings of asteroids, kind of like Saturn. They didn't have that before. Now that's in, which is great. You have massive sprawling ocean planets now, which is really kind of crazy to think about, but you can go and, you know, make a base underwater, so why not? Then also coming soon, kind of like the tessellation, they're going to be adding volumetric clouds. So they're going to replace their current cloud system for a new one, which makes skyboxes look crazy good. They actually look real, some of the skyboxes they're showing off, but currently with the current cloud system, it's not quite like that. So just, you know, look forward to that, but that is coming with this patch. It's just not coming on, you know, the first couple days of patch day, just in case, you know, other things break. They've redone the UI. You've probably noticed some of that. There's a lot of better improvements on some of the quick menus that come down from the bottom. So like the building menus that you currently have to build bases, it feels a lot kind of like the building menu in Fallout 4, for example, but they've just gone and kind of improved upon it. It's a lot faster than it was before. There's also new quick menus for, you know, summoning your ship or going into photo mode or recharging certain equipment or even going into third-person camera. So there's like 2 new quick menus that they've added, which work pretty well. I always get the 2 confused because on PC it's like X and C or X and Z or something like that. See, I don't even know it now. And I always hit the wrong one when I'm trying to get into one of the quick menus. But for the most part, it's nice to have a new and updated UI that works really, really well. Because on top of that, you have the new UI for like summoning all your ships. And that's tied into that, which is nice to have. They've updated all of the space stations. So like space stations actually have a marketplace in them. So there's, you know, 20 or 30 NPCs on a space station now, as opposed to like 5 or 6. You could go up and talk to these guys, and some of them give you missions and some of them don't. But there's just a huge change to space stations that make them feel really lived in and kind of crazy. You have new AI for all of the creatures. You know, some creatures will go together in packs now, and some won't. There's new little like eggs all over the surfaces of planets. If you go and attack them, crazy creatures will come up, which are a little scary to say the least. So you got to kind of be careful for that. But essentially, the AI is drastically improved, and with that comes a lot scarier gameplay when you're playing alone, and a lot more cooperative play when you're playing with other people. All of the audio has been updated on top of that, and with all of those changes, you've got what is essentially a brand new game. I mean, it's taken me, what, 30 minutes to just generally go over the changes, and that's not to say that there's all these other changes from a ton of other patches that they've had that they've already added in. You know, that's not talking about any of the vehicles or anything like that. This game, at this point, is a completely new game, and it is absolutely worth buying. It's on sale almost everywhere at the moment. You know, go to Green Man Gaming or go to the Humble Bundle store. You'll find it very cheap on both of those, for example. I'm sure it's on sale other places. I just haven't really looked other places. And if you're, you know, one of those people who didn't pick it up at launch because of all the bad press, now's the time to pick it up because it is a new game. It is a very good new game, and it is better than what they had promised at their launch, which was pretty abysmal. But, you know, what they were promising sounded cool. So now that it's better than that, it's definitely worth playing. The big question that I need to answer is it better to play with friends or is it better to play alone? Because I know a lot of people have asked me that question already since the patch launched. I think that it is neither better or worse to play with or with friends, or with or without friends rather, because if you're playing by yourself, you're kind of exploring at your own pace and you're being able to, you know, play the game, especially if you've never played it before, at a pace that is reasonable for you. If you have played the game before and you have kind of done a lot of the main story and all that, then playing with other friends is gonna be just superior in every way. It's one of those games that it's fun by yourself, but if you have friends, it's gonna be exponentially more fun, because you get to experience things together. You get to like laugh at really weird generated creatures together, and that's just always a good experience. It's kind of like playing Borderlands, right? I think this is the best comparison I can make. Borderlands by itself is really fun. Borderlands with friends is hilarious, and you need to play that game with friends. So this is kind of the same way. You could play it alone, it'll be fun. Play it with friends, you'll have a way better time. And with the game being as cheap as it is on sale for the launch of this patch, you should be able to find plenty of friends who will pick it up and play with you. But let me know if you're playing the game in the comments below. Are you enjoying it? Are you enjoying this update? Do you prefer some of the other updates? Like, where are you at in the spectrum of No Man's Sky players? Are you new? Are you a returning player? What are you feeling about all of this stuff? Because again, it took me like over 30 minutes to talk about just the changes that came in this patch. Like, I can't imagine a new player coming into this game and just being like, wow, that's overwhelming, and just jumping in and having fun and kind of seeing what their perspective is compared to some of the people who've been playing since launch. You know, what is your experience so far with this patch, and are you enjoying it? Let me know, again, in the comments below. But with all of that being said, I'm going to go just jump in and play the game with friends because it's freaking fun. We shall see you guys next time.